Welcome to Broken Tweed. My name is Cheyenne Brown, and if you don't know what we do here, we are a magazine that is all about democratizing good design. That means affordable home decor, architecture, and interiors for you. If that piques your interest, please subscribe to the channel and the magazine, which will be linked below for free, and keep on watching. Today's podcast setup is a little bit different because I am speaking with someone from across the pond in the US. I'm joined by Sarah Seyoung McFarland, who is a qualified psychologist with a particular interest in design. Sarah has namely been featured in Living Etc., House Beautiful, New York Post, Apartment Therapy, and she runs her own blog called Trulery, covering design as it relates to identity. If you're really interested in that as well, it'll be in the description below for you to check out. We will, of course, look into all of these things, but thank you, Sarah, for taking the time to give us a Tweed talk.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's fun to be here from across the pond.
So I guess just jumping straight in, for people who are listening who don't know you or much about interior design or psychology, what does your work entail?
Okay, so maybe I just give a little bit about my background. So I actually have a clinical background, so I'm a licensed psychologist by trade. I spent many of my earlier years doing clinical work with children, so in the area of child abuse and trauma, but I'm also very much a creative, and I have a creative side. And so I did some research because I was a little bit unsettled just doing clinical work alone. So I did some research and I found this really niche area of psychology known as design psychology. And then I found fashion psychology. And then I said, this is for me because it blended my interests in fashion and design with my background in psychology. And so right now I run a platform called Trulery, and it consists of a vintage shop, consulting and styling, and editorials, all from a psychological lens.
Okay. Well, I think that's really helpful as well for people who kind of don't know the background and also how somebody would go into your line of work. And you
Mhm.
mentioned as well that fashion psychology is also a big part of the work that you do. For someone who wouldn't understand what that means, what is fashion psychology and design psychology as well?
Okay, so whenever you hear the word psychology and something in front of it, it usually means applying psychology to that thing. So, with regards to fashion, fashion psychology, applying psychology to what we know about fashion, to what we know about clothes, and it explores the ways that clothes affects the way we think, affects the way we feel and behave. It supports identity. So looking at all of that stuff, looking at fashion from a psychological lens, and the same thing with design as well. Looking at interiors from a psychological lens, how interiors support us or reflect us. So it's really they're up and coming fields and they're really fascinating.
And I guess as well, it's like you said about how when you see a discipline in front of the word psychology and you've described what it's about, it's quite niche the type of psychology that you've decided to go into. What made you
Definitely.
about this, and how did you realize that there was kind of the link between design and psychology?
Well, I had to do some research because I was so unsettled, and they said that when you're unsettled, that kind of is what makes you move and do different things. And so I just was looking through blogs, looking through books, and then I found this woman by the name of Toby Israel, and I found that she was a psychologist. Her background is environmental psychology, and she specialized in design psychology. So I reached out to her, and she had this internship program. So I took her program. So I learned all about that. And then with regards to fashion, I just did a lot of research. I did a lot of studying, looking at blogs, looking at other people that were doing similar things. Now, in the United States, there really isn't there isn't really a strong field in that area. It's not they don't really have fashion psychology here the way that they do in the UK. So there's more structure in the UK. around that niche area. Here it's up and coming. So both design and fashion psychology are very niche. You probably won't find programs at, academic programs that specify that here. But you can always, put two and two together. You take a psychology course, you take a fashion course, and you make it work for yourself. That's what I did.
Yeah. I guess we initially met because I was writing a piece for Living, etc. about design therapy. And I was
Mhm.
going to ask you as well, what are the benefits for someone who has no clue what design therapy is?
So I would say it's a supportive um, therapeutic endeavor. It's not to take the place of therapy, but it can support you as you're going along your journey. We find that what's in our homes, what's in our spaces, very much affect our mood, affect the way we think, affect the way we behave, and we try to incorporate furnishings that support us as we're trying to be the best versions of ourselves. So that's in a nutshell what design therapy is. It's supposed to work alongside traditional therapy.
I guess as well, I'm looking at your beautiful background. Tell us about your home and your space. And if you could just tell us like what type of accommodation you live in, and do you have a specific design style that represents you?
Yes. So this house is, I guess they consider it a neo-colonial. So it was built in 1967. It's a single family home. It's very suburbia, very much a 1970s home. And I like the idea of being able to make it modern. So we're fixing it up now, trying to renovate it and trying to do it in a way that honors the time it was built, but then, honors what we want and what we need out of the space as well. And so I guess you can say my style is I lean towards classic with a twist. Like I'm drawn to things that feel traditional but have something extra to them. So like if you see like my wallpaper, it's pretty traditional. It's a traditional scene, but then I found this mirror. Actually, we made this mirror based upon a mirror that we saw in a museum. I just like the way that it was modern. It was like unexpected. It's maybe if someone had this wallpaper, they might either do a minimal mirror or maybe a more traditional mirror, but I felt like this had something different. So I'm always looking for that twist. So I guess that's how you would describe my style. I like to do things that maybe aren't what most people would do, at least in my opinion. So that always kind of like is a little bit stimulating for me, energizing to do something a little different.
Definitely, and you can see it
Yeah.
in your space. It's so gorgeous, like very eclectic.
Yes. Eclectic. That's a word I would use as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And just as a question to you, what is something that you're excited about for this year?
Let's see. So I'm excited about growing Trulery. So, like I said, there's a vintage shop, there's a consulting and styling part to it, and there's also editorials. So, in the beginning of this year, I expanded our editorial section to include some creative direction, so creative directing work. So, I did a shoot based upon a write-up that I did looking at the way that children's dress impacts us as we get older. And so I created the shoot around that concept. So I hired a photographer, I had an assistant stylist and a model, and I did all the styling. And then I got it published in Lemon magazine. It's like a fashion magazine for kids. And I was so excited about doing that. And I was like, I think this is my thing. I think I'm going to be doing more of this creative directing stuff. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
I'm very excited to see it.
Yeah.
Going into trends, a lot
hmm
of trends have kind of arrived on the scene in the first quarter of 2026. And I feel like you'll have such an interesting perspective on this given your background. To start off easy, what is your favorite trend that you've seen so far this year and why?
Okay, so there are so many, but I think the what I'm drawn to, I'll go with that. I like colors that are when you put colors together and you don't expect those colors to be together, colors that are a little bit off. Like kind of going back to that like unexpected thing that I tend to be drawn to. So I like the idea of putting like a Tiffany blue with like an emerald green together, or like or and a dark blue on top of that. I know it sounds kind of, you can't really picture it, but I'm actually imagining the things that I've seen with that color scheme, and I just love that it's the tension between those colors because they're not contrasty colors. They're on the same sides of the color wheel. So when you start playing with colors on the same side of the color wheel, it's kind of unexpected because there's a tension there that it feels like it kind of doesn't go because it doesn't complete each other like contrast colors do. But it if in glimpse of it, like you, it creates interest and it feels different. And I love it. So that's one of the things that I've been seeing that I like. Also, which I don't know if it's a more recent trend, but I've been seeing more of it, is wall to wall carpeting. I mean, that was something that was, in ages ago, but I'm starting to see it in ways that I really like, because I think there's like a luxuriousness about it. Of course, it depends on how it's done, but I've seen it done in ways that were really appealing, that are really appealing to me. So, yeah.
And I think
Those two.
it's really well because I've heard a lot of people kind of talking about colors on the same kind of side of, well, around the same area in the color wheel, but I haven't
Yeah.
heard people talk about it in terms of like just there's not huge contrast, but there's different intensities in terms of like comparing like Tiffany blue to like a deep green, like an emerald green. Um, and it's like when you put it like that, it would be hard for like a viewer at home to picture, but then it's like you you'd see an image of that and say in different textures and things, and then you really start to think, oh, this is we're talking business here.
Yeah, like it doesn't work necessarily in theory because it's not the safe color scheme, but when you see it, that's another thing about design. Sometimes things don't work on paper, but that's why you have to try things out because sometimes it reads differently and you won't know why until you actually try it out, you
Oh,
know?
definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Um, I was going to ask as well. I know that you're somebody who loves color, but I have to ask you about Pantone's Cloud Dancer. So, for people at home who don't know, Cloud Dancer is Pantone's controversial color of the year because it's a warm white. And people have kind of made their own analyses online. A lot of people are saying that it is a kind of a hint at rising levels of fascism. Some people are even saying like it's people trying to push us into conformity, and others just think it's plain. But I was going to ask what you think from a psychological perspective, Pantone's choice means for where we're headed in design.
Yeah, I can see that. All of what you've said, I can see why people would see it that way. Um, Yeah, another way to look at it is that, we're talking about warm white. So that's a neutral. And so neutrals like that are warm tend to be stabilizing and grounding. And so I think it could be a reaction to what's going on in our world right now, where everything seems so topsy-turvy. There's a lot of anxiety in the air. Things feel chaotic. So when things feel chaotic, we tend to retreat to what's comfortable, what's grounding. And so, I mean, that could be an explanation. I mean, people could come up with a bunch. I think that Pantone has their own explanation as well. But I mean, warm white, you love it or you don't love it, but it's definitely useful in a space if you need to have something neutral. So, but I think that what happens um, when people are not comfortable, they revert back to what is comfortable. And warm, natural, white is a neutral and it's predictable.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how I've seen it. Like especially with speaking to different people in design at different brands who are bringing out things. A lot of them are focusing on kind of a quiet reset, and a lot of people are just like they need their space to be kind of calming. And for some people, a warm white would be just that. Um, on the topic of kind of warm, people are moving away from like millennial grey and kind of the modern minimalist decor of kind of the last decade or so. Why do you think this is, and do you think there is any benefit to doing this?
I think that millennial gray has run its course. I think whenever you see too much of something, eventually people are just going to get tired of it. Millennial gray, it's a neutral, but it's cool. It's a cool neutral. It's modern because it has that black and white in it somewhere. So it feels modern. And I think that's what people were drawn to it in the beginning. But I think with anything, when everything starts being that, everything is like millennial gray, like you just get really tired of it. And so I can understand why it's run its course.
Yeah. I get that's such an interesting perspective because I think people are just like
Yeah.
not dated, but it's one of those things where people haven't really given that why. And like you say, it's like there is this thing where we can get fatigued when we see something just too much of something. And we go, oh, why is there so much of this? Um, as as a design psychologist, you're more clued up on color theory than most people on TikTok. I just want to get your thoughts on the unexpected red theory, and do you think it's true? For those who are listening and lost about the unexpected red theory at home, it is going viral on TikTok, and it suggests that you can improve any space in your home simply by adding an unexpected pop of red. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, of course, I mean there it's a little bit of a marketing like a marketing gimmick to create hype, to say like any space, but I get where it's coming from. Red is a stimulating color, it energizes. So if you have a pop of that in it, it creates interest. So if you have like a all neutral space and then you put red in it, it's like, oh, it's really not, I don't think that's something new, but I think it's just being marketed in a different way. And even if it's not even a neutral that you have to use for it to pop. Even if you use something like I was talking about before on the same side of the color wheel, like a very pale pink and then a red. That's different. Or like a coral and then a red. That's interesting. That's not what you would expect. So I think there's different ways to do it, and it does make things pop if it's done in the right way. So I guess that's kind of where it's coming from.
Yeah. And I love that as well, like just tying it back to what you were saying about just the trend of using similar colors on the color wheel. And also
Hmm.
when it comes to like pinks as well, because they're often so subtle and soft, and then contrasting it with such a strong and with red because it has all of these different connotations. It
Yeah.
oh, that's so interesting. Yeah. I was going to ask as well, as people try to make their homes more space efficient, we've seen this kind of with garden sheds and like the rise of the she shed and all of these things, and the growing popularity of DIY sheds as home offices for remote work. Why do you think this is taking off? Why do you think people are using their gardens in this way?
I think that homes now are doing double duty. We're going through a transition from the old to the new. So in this modern society, there's the boundaries are very blurred. So like home is no longer just home. Now especially since COVID, we're working at home. And so people are finding new and innovative ways to create spaces that work for them. And that's really what we want. We don't want a space that doesn't work for us anymore. So, people that are doing that, my hat's off to them that they're able to create something new and innovative, in a space, that people probably ignored, back in the day. So I think that's why we're
Yeah,
seeing that. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. It's so interesting, like to that point about post-COVID, that the world has just fundamentally changed, and that is reflected in our homes.
Yeah.
Um, for someone considering a garden office or a she shed, are there any kind of psychological benefits to working from the garden as opposed to a desk at home?
Well, definitely, especially if you have windows, because the studies show that when we're exposed to nature, plants, even if artwork, anything that has sort of nature on it, it does promote well-being. And I think part of that has to do with the idea that when when people are in spaces that feel pleasant, It doesn't demand as much mentally. So your mind is freer, freer to think, freer to problem solve, freer to focus. So it creates this sense of well-being. So if you can, if you're in a shed and you're exposed to nature, I think that's great. That's what you would want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I think, and there's been, I guess, so much talk about well-being and burnout post COVID and remote working. So it's so interesting seeing how like people are, like you said, making homes work overtime so that we can kind of have at-home wellness sanctuaries. Um,
Yeah.
Post COVID as well, we saw and started, well, we're starting to see even more now, fashion and interiors merge, which is perfect for you because you specialize in both.
Yeah.
Last year, it kind of reached a boiling point as fashion and interiors brands began doing collaborations, and some popular fashion influencers started doing home content. Why do you think the two are joining forces?
I've always liked the connection between fashion and design. I even did a few posts where I turned an outfit into a room. So I designed a room based upon an outfit. They're very related in the sense that they both are reflections of who we are. If you go to somebody's house, you can probably tell a lot about them from their furnishings. If you look in someone's wardrobe, you can probably tell a lot about them. They're both extensions of ourselves and ways to express ourselves creatively. So I think it's just sort of a natural connection between the two. And I love both.
What's the name of that blog post as well for people who are very interested at home and just wanting to know and read it?
Oh, oh God, what did I call it? It's on my blog, so it's not on it's on my it's a section on my blog, not on the editorials. Um, and I tag it's escaping me now that what I called it, but it was just something that I did. I used Photoshop and I just really just turned these outfits into a room, and I don't remember what I called it. But
Don't worry.
if you actually look on my Instagram, um, I pinned one of them, so you can see it. So my Instagram Trulery, you can actually see what I did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll do a cutaway tonight. Everybody can.
Okay.
Um, with also post-COVID, not only are people working at home or working from home more, but people are going out less, meaning social events are often being hosted in homes. Is this a good thing or a bad thing, or both, and why?
Well, I think context is key. If you want to stay home, that's a good thing. If not, then that's a different conversation. But if you're hosting at home, that's always good. If that's something you're looking to do, because when you host at home, you're inviting people into your space, and that creates connection and bonding, and the energy in your house lifts a little bit when you have that kind of camaraderie. And you have your space designed the way you want to, and that's always a benefit. Sometimes you don't always have this your space designed the way you want to, but when people come in, it still brightens things up. So it can be very positive, and it's the idea of serving as well. Like, I'm hosting these people, I'm serving these people, you feel good, and then you connect that feel good to your space. So then you feel good in your space for something that you did. So you make all of these like connections that you may not be aware of, but it's what's happening when you decide to like let people into your space. Yeah.
Definitely. And then I guess as well, like going into that, what you were saying as well about context. In the context of kind of third spaces, because I know there's a lot of like online discourse where people are talking about like shopping malls closing and there's no more third spaces and things like that. Do you think that do you think that this is necessarily a bad thing that kind of the third space is shrinking or like becoming more refined or do you think it's kind of a neutral?
You mean third space, meaning people going out to actually do
Yeah, like
things?
anything that isn't kind of work or home.
Yeah, I think that with new technology, and different things that happen in culture that are new for people, there's always an adjustment. So I think we're in an adjustment. I mean, social media is relatively new. This whole technology thing is relatively new. And so we're learning how to navigate it. And some of the things that we used to do before, we're not doing as much because we don't need to. But then I think we might start to experience what we're missing when we're no longer doing those things. And some of the things we're missing may be things that we enjoyed before. So now we have to calibrate and figure out, like, how are we going to navigate this? And so we have to put boundaries on ourselves. So if people are feeling like they're not um, going out as much and doing as much, and maybe that's not a healthy thing for them, maybe they're stuck inside and that's not it's not contributing to well-being, then we need to find ways to get that back, get back that socialization, go out and do things. We just have to put limits on it. And I think that's with anything that happens that's new for a group of people. They have to adjust. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's something that everybody's thinking about is how do we adjust to this new mode of life that we just didn't expect because it's such a big
Yeah.
change. And
With the
with
good comes the bad. So it's never all good, never all bad. You got to try to
yeah,
work it out. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And I guess and even the bads can be made good as well. And
Yeah.
it's so interesting because everybody's looking at what COVID did to society and like and how it's changed our cultural norms. But now everyone's feeling really nostalgic as a result of that. And this year, a lot of the design trends are reflecting that because we have people yearning for 2016, we have people looking to 1976, and we have people looking to 1926 and through
Yeah.
70s revival and neo deco and all of these different trends that are resurfacing. Why do you think these decades in particular are things that people from 2026 are so drawn to? And do you think there are any kind of stark similarities between or differences between the 70s and the 20s to 40s and 2016 that maybe are causing us to long for them?
I think people are just nostalgic. Like when you think about those years, they're 10, 50, and 100 years. So it's like those are significant milestone years. And so I think whenever you have a group of people that are anxious, there's chaos, we do look back to see, like, okay, what was happening before? And we get nostalgic and we yearn for the past, right? So maybe that's why we see people sort of preoccupied with those decades. And those, the design that was happening during those times, we can kind of relate to that. I'm trying to think. So the 20s was kind of like the start of the Art Deco Bauhaus movement. And so it was like modern. I think like there was a pandemic during that decade. I think there was like they came off out of a war. So that stuff we relate to, like, oh, that happened to us. Let's see what's going on over there, So I mean, we don't articulate it that way, but I think that's what happens. And then we're drawn to things that still speak to us, like some of those modern furnishings speak to the way that we live now. I'm trying to think also the 70s, there was that sort of, I'm thinking like boho, stuff that I'm just thinking of design trends that we can relate to. Um, and then, 2016, which it wasn't too long ago, a different time as well. I mean, I think I remember the furnishings being very bright, a lot of color. The internet was really new then, social media was new. And so, because we're maybe feeling a little chaotic now, we go back to that time that we sort of reimagine as something that was better. Maybe it wasn't better all the way, but because we're where we are, we go back and we what's the word when you like you make things seem bigger than they really are or better than they really are. We we like, we sort of exaggerate, a little bit. But because we're sort of looking, we're yearning, That's how I see it. Um, yeah, I think that's what happens. This nostalgia.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because I've spoken to quite a few people about this as well, and you're the first person to tell me about the kind of 10, 50, 100 year mark. And I hadn't
Yeah,
even thought of the fact that we as a society really love anniversaries, like big anniversaries. And I think you see it in the fact that like whenever a big anniversary comes out, like a biopic movie will come out, or whenever we just reach some milestone, it's almost a way that we kind of make sense of ourselves that we have to have these kind of in this many years this happened and it's so amazing and like you were saying that the romanticization of that time and even if it wasn't as like grand and beautiful as we thought it was
hmm,
it was so interesting actually. This earlier this week, I was looking at Tinker and Tallulah's new collection because they're basically a luxury lampshade brand in the UK, and they decided to do like a Bieber style collection where they just were inspired by Barbara Lanke and kind of all of the Bieber movement and all of the like iconic women that were in that sort of world and brand building of Bieber. And it
yeah.
was so interesting that because they were 70s brands that looked back to the kind of the Art Deco opulence, it's so interesting that we're looking back at a time that was looking back as well. And
It
that
is.
it's like this like thread of at every stage we've had this nostalgia and that it's not new. But like you say, it's just that we get an anniversary and we're like, oh okay, it's time.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And I
interesting.
think we don't have enough perspective on a decade until afterwards. So, because I remember, I don't know, I think I might have even said this to you one time, but I remember like being in the 90s. I'm old. So being in the 90s and then feeling like this decade has nothing to offer. And I remember feeling like that. Like everything we were doing in the 90s was basically the 60s and 70s. So I'm like, what are we going to look back on and say? And then now the 90s is so big.
Oh
And
yeah.
I get it. I'm like, oh, I see. We were doing that.
Oh,
Like it's
oh yeah,
only
like
when afterwards do you realize like, oh, okay. So yeah. So even though we do copy previous decades, there is something here that's new, but we're not going to really know until later. That's what I think.
that's so interesting because like
Yeah.
I've had the exact same thoughts about right now as you've had of the 90s of like we have to offer all we're doing is like archives and reviving old styles but
Yeah.
thinking that the fact that you were thinking that way about the 90s and it's come to
Yeah.
be one of the most iconic eras of design both in fashion and interiors and in so many ways like so many other forms of art and culture. Yeah, I think maybe there's hope for us.
So we're doing something now, we just don't know what.
Yeah. Um, I guess staying on the topic of these nostalgic trends, one I do want to talk about is Neo Deco, which is, I guess, while people are romanticizing Art Deco, there's like this reimagining of Art Deco, which is merging kind of mid-century and it's merging modern style to kind of give you the functionality of a modern home, but kind of the decadence of an Art Deco home. And I was just going to ask, why do you think that's so alluring, and why do you think that is so special and different to kind of anything else that we've seen, like in terms of interpretations of Art Deco, in terms of yeah.
I think that we're revisiting it and trying to modernize it because it's something we can relate to right now. Like if you look at the Art Deco furnishings, there's a lot of curves, it's plush, it's glamorous, all the stuff that we're kind of looking for right now. We curves like signify comfort. We're looking for that right now. Um, Maybe some of us are looking for glamour because things don't seem glamorous at all. So we're just trying to reach for whatever feels good. So I think we tend to try to modernize old styles, the old styles that we can relate to. So I guess, that's it right now. And I mean, it looks good. It looks fresh, something that we haven't seen and still modern, you know. So, um, And I say like, any decade's up for grabs if you could reinvent it and make it look great. You know what I mean? So,
Well, definitely. And it's so
yeah.
interesting as well because my last guest, Jasmine Parker, she predicted that the future of luxury would be the time to find one-of-a-kind pieces and like thrift stores and antique markets and she was just saying that that would be luxury rather than kind of being able to just go to a really expensive department store and buy like a few £1,000 pieces. Um, Coincidentally, the vintage and antiques market is absolutely booming. And now there's, instead of this stigma around hand-me-downs, there's such bragging rights about hand-me-downs. And why do you think this is the case, like right now specifically?
I think it's because, well, I think thrifting and antiquing have always been somewhat in vogue in certain sects of the population, but it's becoming more mainstream now because I think we're so overexposed to everything. Everything is mass produced. Even luxury brands are like all over the place. We see them through social media, even if we can't afford them. So it's losing something. So I think people are reverting to something that is a little bit more niche and harder to grab onto, which is finding something that hardly anyone else has. I think that's appealing for people who have been like just overexposed to everything. Now, fortunately, there's really nothing new under the sun. So, I mean, you can find a unique piece, but I think more than that. It's even more important to be able to style it and design it in a way that's unique to you. To me, that's the real luxury. Like,
Yeah.
I love the idea of like having something that's like very mundane, very regular, and like just making it so different that you go, huh, I didn't think to do that. To me, that's the real luxury. Yeah, I love that. Because everyone can't do that well. It takes some creativity. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I think I can agree with you there in terms of there is such a difference between being able to get something that's one of a kind and actually being able to style something that's or style something that's regular but make it look one of a
Yeah.
kind. Before we actually got on this call, I remember seeing something on Instagram where someone had got like plastic spoons, cut off the tops of the plastic spoons and made it into this amazing vase. And I was just in shock because I was like, it's a glass jar and plastic spoons and some hot glue. This is going to look awful. And then by the end of it, I was just amazed because it looks like a luxury piece, and I was just in awe. And I guess it's really the luxury is what you do with the
Yeah.
regular and the ordinary. That's so interesting.
Cool.
Um, so I going on to well, that's a good segue into DIY arts and crafts. They are really popular ways to get home decor and furniture now. Why do you think it's taken off in the way it has? I know that's always been a thing and people have always been crafty, but why do you think now everybody's coming up with new and fresh and inventive ways to make their homes stylish on a budget through DIY and art?
I think that it kind of speaks to what we were saying. I think it's that draw to the one of a kind piece.
Mm,
So what's more one of a kind than you doing it yourself?
mm.
And I'm not a very crafty person, so my hat goes off to people who are crafty. I'm more of the visionary, so I'm like I imagine it, and I'm like, okay, so you do the work. I'll imagine. I have
You're
the
the
vision, but like you
architect.
know, um, but I think that's what it is. It's being able to create something that's unique to you, and what better reflection of you than to have something that you made. So I think that's what the draw is.
And then what home design trend would you like to see make a comeback this year?
Oh, okay, let's see. Um, so I would say that maybe not a specific trend per se. I think what I want to see make a comeback is people not relying so much on trends to make their design decisions. Like, I mean, we're just like inundated with trends all over the place. I really liked it when people didn't have so much access to design. And that's weird to say because I'm always like, be aware, know what's going on. But I think that there's a line where you could know too much. that it like thwarts your creativity. I mean, there was a time where design wasn't as mainstream. People kind of just did things their own way. Maybe they saw it in a book, or maybe they, saw it in the store or their friends, and that was about it. And they kind of did their own thing or did what felt right to them. Something about that is charming, if it's done in a way that's appealing, versus like you're just like, looking at trends all over social media and like you're just being inundated. And then after a while, it's just like, it's just what everyone is doing and it doesn't feel like anything. You know what I mean? I would like to see people kind of like not rely so much on just like
What is
constant put of what they're seeing on social media.
well,
Get a
definitely.
book, do like go through old design books maybe or something. That's
Yeah.
my way anyway.
I think I think there is something to be said about having that balance between, yes, I'm going to look on Instagram and see kind of what's fresh and what's going on there, but I'm also
Yeah,
going to some books. I'm going to read about what designers are doing. I'm going to get look in the magazines. I'm going to get some inspiration elsewhere. I'm going to go into physical stores and I think it's that mixture of different influences that makes your home feel so authentic,
yeah,
in a way that I feel Instagram can't imitate in a way. Because everybody, I guess as well, there's the motivation of people on Instagram who are just like, I just need as many people as possible to see this, and I need as many people as possible to like this. So really, their home is kind of a democracy rather than their own home, and that's
yeah,
really difficult. And it's easy for us to forget that that's what we're seeing. We're seeing something that's meant to make us go wow, but actually, are they happy in their home, or is it just a collection of wow for the internet sort of thing?
yeah. Like, is it livable?
Mm. I mean, there are a few trends actually that I've seen where I thought that's cute, but could you live with that? Like, I don't know,
I know.
and I'm kind of like, let's gonna keep
Yeah.
my thoughts to myself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true.
I do want to zoom in on the home and the mind, because I feel it would be such a wasted opportunity to not pick your brain on this.
Hmm.
Um, do you agree with the statement, the home is an extension of the mind?
Yes, most definitely, actually. Um, I feel like if you go to someone's house, that the way that the house is designed can give you a snapshot of where they are in their life. Maybe not everything. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule, but typically, if you go to someone's house, it gives you a snapshot of where they are in their life. So, like for example, if they're running a business and they have rhythm and it's they're working at it every day, you might see like organization there. If they're feeling stuck and they're not happy, you might see like not a whole lot of attention paid to their space. So I feel like your space does reflect it, whether you do it intentionally or not. Um, yeah, I feel like definitely. I feel like even a lot, not even just homes, but like the spaces that we're in or the spaces the things where we contain our things, like our car and our bag. If you look at
Mm.
somebody's bag, that might tell you where they are right now. Like if you look at mine, I wouldn't have anyone look in my bag right now. It's reflecting a little bit of chaos that I need straightened out, but yeah.
It's interesting as well because I guess like it's like you can have people who do have the most beautiful, clean, organized homes or fridges and all of these things, and it's like look in their bag, or like, or alternatively, they can have the most organized, clean bag with like a few things in there, and you think, how do they cope? But then you go into their homes, and it's like they've got like one room that's just dedicated to like shoving everything in, and yeah,
I mean, we're complex beings. We might have it together over here, but we don't quite have it together over there. So,
I think it's the human condition, and I guess it goes back to that idea of just it being authentic and being lived in. Is that sometimes we're gonna have areas where there is a lot of clutter and there's a bit of
yeah,
crazy that we're not ready to face yet. Um,
yeah.
with homes pulling a lot more weight post COVID, we've talked a lot about that. It's difficult for people to rest when they get home. How would you suggest people design their homes in a way that allows them to get quality rest?
Hmm. So I think it's really important to furnish your home in a way that supports you. So if you have a space or rooms that you're trying to design, think about what you want to do in each of those spaces and make sure that what you put in there helps you to do that. So if you want a space that is calming and relaxing, then you want to choose furnishings that support that. So like now we're going into like calming colors, lighting that feels calm, dim lighting, being able to control the lighting, because control is very important. You know, it speaks to our ability just to control our lives in general. You know, you want to think about texture, you want to think about like what you're hearing, so you want to consider all the different senses when you're designing, not just visual. Visual is important, but there are other senses that are important to design for as well.
That's so interesting as well, because I guess when people think about sleep, they're just like, eliminate all blue light, or it's just always visual, but they never think about, okay, but what can you smell when you're going to sleep, or when you're actually trying to have downtime, and what can you hear, and what's kind of in this case, I can hear sirens because I live in central London. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, what can you hear, and what are you touching? What is the textures that are on your bed and in your bedspread and things like that?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. With I guess as well, a lot of my readers want a beautiful home on a tight budget, and this year's trends have shown that they kind of also need a home that promotes general wellness. Drawing from your expertise, what affordable tips would you suggest for like a home that promotes wellness?
I think there's so many different options. So like you want to consider the different um, furnishings that promote wellness and how you can get that cheaply. So like for example, studies show that artwork is really important that's reflective of you. We call those identity anchors, being able to see yourself in the space. So you can just go to your local vintage shop or flea marketing and get artwork, things like that. I mentioned plants promote well-being, nature promotes well-being. Make you That's an inexpensive option, you can get that in your space. Just trying to think what else. um I mentioned that you want to consider scent. So all of the senses. So scent is also an inexpensive option. Um, and the thing about scent is interesting because studies show that first of all, it we experience it sometimes below our level of awareness. So we're not necessarily aware of scent unless it's really bad or really good. Um, so but studies show that when a space smells good, we actually linger longer. Time goes by a little bit quicker because we're like sort of, we enjoy where we're at. So having a nice smelling space can actually, contribute to you wanting to stay there and feel good. So things like that. Yeah.
That is such an interesting piece of research as well, that will stay there longer because it smells good.
Yeah, we linger. I think
Yeah.
that's why when you go into to shops that
Mm,
smell good, that's why sometimes you can notice that it smells good. They make
mm.
a deliberate effort to have people want to stay. Yeah.
That's so interesting. And I find myself doing that, especially like when I'm out shopping. And if say like I walk into a store and the smell is like overwhelming, it's like you do feel like, oh my gosh, I need to leave, or I'm here too long. And it's so interesting.
Yeah.
And are there any things that you'd advise that clients of yours or just people in general avoid in their home?
I would say to avoid furnishing your house, and kind of like what we spoke about before, avoid furnishing your house just just based upon the look of it.
Mm,
Like it's pretty, that's nice, but you're not gonna be able to, pretty's not gonna be the end all be all when you have to live in the space. You need to design for um how you want to live and how you want it to support you. So I do this thing with clients called the ideal home statement. So we do like this whole environmental autobiography where we look at their past experience with place And then based upon all of that, they create this ideal home statement. So whenever we pick furnishings, it's going to be based upon that ideal home that they said that they wanted. Um, and it's not just I like it because it looks nice or it's trendy. I like it because, this color was meaningful to me when I was growing up, my family, or this piece of, this object, this, piece of furniture was meaningful to me. So you really try to incorporate meaning into your design, and it creates a much more emotionally satisfying space. Yeah.
Interesting. And this is the first time I'm coming across the idea of an environmental autobiography as well.
Yeah.
Such an interesting concept. Um,
Yeah.
how do you think the way that we light our homes kind of affects our mental state, if at all? And
Mhm.
that natural and artificial light.
Yeah. So lighting is important. Daylight, they say, is like one of the best, and it actually makes a space feel brighter or bigger, even or less crowded, even when it is crowded, because there's something about that sunlight. Um, and then you have, heart light that's a little bit more harsh, a little bit cooler. That might be used for something like task lighting. And then you have your amber sort of dim light, which is kind of like candlelight. So you have all different types of lighting, and you need to figure out what one you need where. So that's why control is really important when you're designing a space. They call it sensory boundaries, being able to modulate the sensory information that's coming in to promote well-being and to promote like whatever it is that you need to do in that space. So if you are looking to relax, of course, you want to be able to have dim light. Um, if you are doing a task, you need like more focused light, things like that.
And also just like being able to distinguish between the lights and I guess as well use them to your advantage in terms of
Mhm.
you place them and being strategic in that way. Um, and then I wanted to ask a lot of readers in living in shared apartments or studio apartments um, kind of would love to know what advice you'd give for wellness first design in a small space. Because I know that like modern living is pretty much a lot of people just live in apartments and rentals. And also apartments are getting smaller and especially with open plan, like everything is just all in one now. Um,
Mm.
what advice you give for kind of the small space that's trying to be more wellness first and more focused on mental well-being?
So if it's a small space, it can still work for you if you know um, how to design it, how to where to put what. So you want to consider um, the sensory information that's coming in. Like I said before, you want to consider um, what it is that you need and what spaces can do double duty. So like sometimes they call it nested layers, like rooms within rooms. So, like maybe you need an area for reading or doing your work, and maybe you need an area for watching TV. Maybe somebody else is there and they need an area for something else. So, you try to divide the room up into those different areas. And there's all sorts of ways to do that, to divide up spaces. You can use partitions, you can use rugs, you can use color on walls just to separate spaces, even if there are no walls there. um, but just as long as like everybody kind of knows, everybody has what they need in that space. And then, identity anchors, like I mentioned before, which is like being able to see yourself reflected in that space through meaningful objects or artwork or things like that. So it's kind of just a matter of being creative, but first you need to know what it is you need. What do you need to be doing in that space? And what do you need that space to be doing for you? So yeah, I would start there.
That's so interesting that you make the distinction between what you need to be doing in that space and what that space needs to be doing for you. Like, how
Yeah.
would you define the difference? For, like for someone at home who's kind of like, oh, I thought they were the same thing, and they really want to understand it because they want to get the
Yeah.
most out of their home, especially if they're paying London or
Yeah.
any other big city prices.
Yeah, it's two sides of the same coin. So I'm trying to study, I'm trying to graduate, and I need a place to study. I need a place where I can be, relatively alone and quiet and like focusing. I need to be focusing. So that's what I need from the space. So then what does that space have to give back to me? Well, it needs to have the things that I need in it. Maybe I need a shelf for my books. Maybe I need a partition so I don't see certain things I don't need to see. Maybe I need to have like the technology to be, up to par, like maybe headphones or whatever. Maybe I need, you know, simple artwork that doesn't like distract me, but it adds stimulation when I'm looking up and I need to like be thinking about something. So first you figure out what you need to do and then make sure that that space does that.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay. That is so interesting, along
Yeah.
with about the environmental autobiography. That's really so
Yeah.
interesting. Comparing the world of design when you entered it to now, what do you feel has changed?
um I think more people have just been exposed to it. I think, like I said before, design is becoming more mainstream than it was. Before it was kind of like, sort of niche almost. But I think that like more people are aware of it. So now more people have opinions, more people have information about it, which is not a bad thing. Um, it's just, sometimes having more information doesn't necessarily make it more effective for you because now you might have too much information and you don't really know what to do. But I definitely think that the mainstreaming of design is different than it used to be. Before all of the TV shows and all of that were like really big. The design shows. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and what do you predict we'll see in the coming years in home design?
I think that people are going to um, get weary of being inundated with so much information with regards to design that they will probably start to retreat a little bit and start doing things the old school way, kind of like what we mentioned before, like going out and getting inspiration from other sources. I think eventually all of this stuff that's happening on social media and being sort of bombarded with all of this design information will start to become background noise. I think initially when it was all new, like 10 years ago, it was fresh, so it was new, so it was exciting. But after a while, people get used to things. And I think, eventually people will start to find other ways of like finding inspiration. Um, and then, like I said, all of the stuff that they're getting online will maybe become sort of background noise. I think, yeah, yeah,
How things will kind of come in and come out. 'Cause I guess
yeah,
we're only living once, and to see things changing in real time in our own lives, it's so weird because we don't even. I guess I always think a lot about um, different generations and like what my parents would have seen, especially because their prime was like kind of the 90s and what they were living through in the designs. So them seeing kind of how homes have changed. I know for them, like I see pictures of them in really bright kind of lots of color, and they're kind of just starting to see technology hit. So they've got kind of um, my dad had his turntables because he was a massive DJ, and music was a big part of kind of how they designed and laid out their home.
that's
Um,
cool.
it's so interesting though as well, like how that has changed. And my dad's often he's very grumpy, so he's always complaining of like kids just don't know how to like design a home anymore. Very good art. He's very grumpy about it, but it's so interesting that in our own time we'll see those changes and we'll kind of things that we knew and held dear like just fading into the background slightly, and maybe one day a trend that comes back.
Yeah,
Younger generation to say 2026 they really had it.
probably. That always seems to happen.
Mm. um what do you think we'll leave behind? What do you hope we'll leave behind?
Hmm. What trend we'll leave behind? Um, I hope that we leave behind just designing for what looks pretty. Um, like to have more meaningful, make more meaningful choices. Because I think that's what makes it more interesting. When the choices are meaningful, like it's not just like I just went to this store and picked this because it was there. I think, when houses speak to the person that lives there, it's usually interesting. If some thought and passion, if there's thought and passion behind it. So that's what I hope.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And I think that's really shown in everything that you've been saying that through all the trends that we have, actually, maybe we should step back and go, what am I passionate about rather than kind of what did I just see 5 minutes ago? And
Yeah.
because right now my dopamine's high from seeing it, but uh,
Yeah.
what am I truly passionate about?
Hmm.
And for the listener who has stayed until the end, and is fascinated by what we've been discussing and wants to know more about your work and what you do, how can they get clued up about design psychology?
So if you go on Chulery.com, we have a bunch of resources that speak to design psychology. Stuff that I've read up on is from Toby Israel. So she wrote a book. It's a seminal book called Someplace Like Home. And that's a good introduction to what it's all about. Um, I think you could start there. You'll find your way. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for your Tweed talk.
Yeah.
Been so amazing to hear you share your expertise on this subject, and just to give us a glimpse into um, where we're heading in design as well, and also kind of maybe the psychological drawbacks of going 100 miles an hour into the trends. And it's
Right.
just so interesting to really have this kind of tightrope of what is beneficial to us mentally, and kind of what maybe might be tipping us the other way. So yeah, it's just been such an honor to hear from you. And of course, if anyone at home heard any of this and thought, wow, I'm so intrigued, we'll share all of this information and anything relevant to what we've discussed below in the description. Um, Thank you so much if you have listened to the end. If you genuinely enjoyed it, give it a like. And if you didn't, let us know in the comments, every single comment on, and I'm just looking on how we can improve. So I appreciate all feedback. Subscribe to the magazine. You're going to be seeing a lot on this topic. Have a good week and come back at the same time in about a month to hear from our next guest.